Good evening, my name is Tomas Castaneda, and today I'm going to be presenting my research presentation, which is on gambling and the risks. Previously, I had not chosen a topic, but I chose one from the previous assignment, the list of available topics in the previous assignment, and I also have a PowerPoint presentation to accompany the oral presentation, which will be submitted alongside the video. But aside from that, let's begin. So gambling is one of the fastest growing industries in the United States, no longer limited to cities like Las Vegas. Nowadays, people can gamble from their phones and all sorts of platforms. And due to this increased accessibility, it's important to ask ourselves if the benefits of gambling outweigh the costs of gambling. So in this presentation, I'm going to start by talking about gambling, what it is, its history a little bit, and then I'll discuss the arguments in favor of and then against, and then give my personal opinion on how it should be treated going forward. So let's begin with the introduction. The gambling industry is huge. It generated $72 billion in 2024, which was the fourth year in a row that it increased. However, the same year, it's reported that almost 20 million Americans had at least one problematic gambling behavior during the previous year. This tells two sides of a very different story. While on one side it's very good economically, generating billions of dollars, on the other hand it's very harmful to other people who are struggling with gambling related issues. This raises the question of whether the economic benefits outweigh the social costs to the individual and society at large. And that's a question that I aim to answer. But before I discuss this, I want to just define exactly what gambling is. So gambling refers to the risking of something of value, usually money, on an event with an uncertain outcome, and in hopes of gaining something of greater value in return. Most people generally associate gambling with casinos, but nowadays it's no longer limited to just that. There's also a lot of different forms of it. A good example would be sports betting, which has become more popular as of recently. The lottery is also a popular form of gambling, though most people don't really associate it with it, which is kind of funny. As well as any online gambling website, as there are so many out there today. The only thing that these gambling platforms, I guess you could call them, have in common is the uncertainty of winning anything. And despite this, players continue to risk their money based purely on chance. For most people, it's harmless entertainment, but for others, it can develop into a more serious issue. This is a good reason why understanding the risks and the benefits of gambling is so important. So first, let's look at the side that supports gambling. Legalized gambling has quite a lot of arguments going for it. The industry supports almost 1.5 million jobs across the country. And these jobs include employees at the casino, as well as workers in the cities that these casinos reside in. Another major benefit is the tax revenue. These casinos, obviously, since it's legal, they get taxed by the government, and a lot of the money and a lot of the money that they generate is used to support public services, education, so on and so forth. Casinos also attract a lot of tourism. A great example is our cities like Las Vegas and Atlantic City, which have built a lot of their economy around casinos and people coming to visit. Finally, supporters also argue that it's just another form of entertainment. A lot of people enjoy gambling responsibly, like attending sports or concerts, just like anything else. Now, these economic benefits aren't only limited to the casinos themselves. As I mentioned earlier, in the cities that they are, especially in big cities like, once again, Las Vegas, there is also great economic benefit for the businesses that surround them, hotels mainly, restaurants as well, and entertainment venues in the same city all receive more customers. And as a result of these people also receiving more customers, there's even more tax revenue that the government can collect from these other places surrounded by the casino itself. From an economic standpoint, casinos are very attractive, but that's only one side of the story. To evaluate gambling as a whole, we also need to see what the negative effects of it are, which brings me to the argument against gambling, which is what I believe is the main argument against gambling, which would be gambling addiction. I forgot to show the slide. That's my bad. Gambling addiction is the greatest cost associated with legalized gambling, in my personal opinion. Research shows that it affects the brain's reward system by releasing dopamine, just like any other addiction, and that's the feeling that people get hooked on. Each win generates this dopamine, but what I think is more troubling is what researchers call a near miss, which is when they don't necessarily win, but they're close to doing so, and it releases a similar amount of dopamine to actually winning. So a lot of people keep on betting over and over and over and over again because of this, and they end up losing a lot of money. And they keep on betting also usually get in this cycle where they bet to get the money that they've lost back, and they end up losing more. As addiction grows, it affects people's lives, personal life, their finances, their performance, their relationships, and their mental health. Unlike recreational gambling and responsible gambling, like most people do, it doesn't remain a problem for just the individual. It affects those around them as well, their families, their communities, people around them in general. And this is best explained by a lot of the financial and social consequences of it. Research has shown that people who have gambling addictions are way more likely to get a divorce compared to people who do not. Obviously, financial problems are also a huge issue for people who gamble. Mental health is also a really big issue. And all of these combined can create strains in marriage, in family relationships, and even increase conflicts in the home. So all of these examples show that gambling isn't an individual problem, but more of a public health issue in general for the society these people live in. There are people, of course, who disagree with this argument. And their main argument is that most people tend to gamble responsibly. This is true. $1 million millions of Americans gamble without ever developing an addiction. They also argue that adults should have the freedom to make their own decisions, financial decisions, and these are both reasonable arguments. Since gambling is legal entertainment, the government shouldn't really interfere with their personal choices. Governments, however, even if only a small percentage of people have a gambling addiction, that doesn't mean that society doesn't have to pay the cost for it as well, not just the individual. Because governments also have to spend money on healthcare, treatment for their addictions, unemployment, and bankruptcy assistance. While it may be a personal choice, it often ends up becoming a more public responsibility. So after considering both sides, I reached the conclusion that I believe gambling's harm outweighs its benefits. This is mainly due to the fact that it doesn't really limit itself, the consequences don't limit themselves to only the individual gambler. It also spreads to the people around them and can cause a lot of distress for all of the people who depend on them or have a relationship with this person. Recovery from financial losses can take years, and emotional recovery can take even longer in some cases. I believe that public health shouldn't come at the cost of entertainment, but that being said, it is what some places use to rely on, and a lot of places need gambling in order to maintain their status quo, which is why I don't believe that it should be banned, but instead it should be to try to reduce its harmful effects in the future. So I have 4 ideas as to how this could be done. The first step is to expand treatment programs for people with gambling issues. The second is that they should encourage responsible gambling, so people better understand the risks before they engage in it. The third one is that they limit aggressive advertising, which could target people who are more vulnerable or likely to develop an addiction. And last of all, the expansion of future gambling should be regulated with policies that make an attempt to balance both the risks for the individual as well as the public, and economic growth in mind. By taking these steps, we can protect our communities and still allow gambling to exist responsibly. So that concludes my presentation. I thank you very much for your time. The citations are in the slides. They are from the internet, but I checked most of them on Google Scholar to see whether or not I could use them. But yeah, thank you for listening.